Hi, Hazel here again from Why Property Works, and thanks ever so much for joining me today for another question and answer. I've had some brilliant questions in over the last week, and today I'm going to concentrate on one that I've had from Tony. So here is his question. Hi Hazel, I am in the final throes of completing a renovation of a terraced house and my cash flow is all but dried up. I may flip it or refinance it to free up cash for further investment in 2017 or late 2016. I have a full-time job that takes up most of my time, so I'm trying to hone in on a cash flow income stream that will be best suited to me, bearing in mind that I have to fulfill my commitments to my full-time job. If I sell the terraced house, then anticipate having up to £50,000 to capital to invest in 2017. Alternatively, if I rent it out, then I will only have about £25,000 to invest in early 2017. Therefore, I would like to know what options are available to me. I'm currently not a landlord, but just own two properties, the one I live in and the terraced house. I'm based in Nottingham, East Midlands. I have attended several property courses and I'm very familiar with HMO income strategies. This is still something that I want to work on, but I'm open-minded to any more suitable revenue generating strategies in these changing times. Thanks, Tony. That's a great question, Tony, and obviously quite in depth. So my thoughts on the matter are that, well, hopefully you will have made quite a decent profit on the property that you're renovating up in Nottingham. And I would suggest that, and that's one way of obviously generating a capital sum, which can be used to either work with further developments or further properties that you intend to hold on to as investments. But it's a good way of actually making being able to drip feed yourself certain amounts of money every month. So if you make £20,000 out of a project and you want £1,000 a month cash flow, then that would keep you going for 20 months, for example, whilst you do your next project. But yes, it does all depend on the cash flow. You mentioned HMOs, and yes, they are fantastic types of properties to put into the mix to add additional cash flow. That's what really ramped up our cash flow when we started working with HMOs, approximately coming up to 9-10 years ago now that we started working with HMOs, and they certainly do ramp up the cash flow. One thing I will say is that you do need to have experience as a landlord before you're able to raise finance for HMO properties. So it may well be that maybe one of the next steps that you take will be in purchasing a buy-to-let property at some point, or indeed if you hold on to this property and you pull money back out of it, then you'll have experience, or you'll start to create experience as a landlord, and you need to be able to prove that to the mortgage company, to prove that you have been a landlord and are competent at that before you can raise the HMO finance. Bear in mind also that HMOs tend to be capital intensive unless you are buying in an area where property values are significantly less, and therefore the property costs you less to buy and to set up. I have worked with clients who have found incredibly good deals on HMOs at reasonable prices and made very, very good cash flow from them. So it is all possible, but you kind of need to follow the logical progression. I mean, you've now developed a property, you're either going to refinance it or sell it on, and I'd replicate the same thing. If you're doing well with this one, then you learn your craft. Another thing I would say, if you're looking at alternative cash flow strategies, there are plenty of other sort of new strategies, or new or not so new strategies in the market, and these include rent to rent, they include serviced accommodation, and the idea of lease options where you're not having to own the actual property yourself. Now, I would just say proceed with any of those with a word of caution, because I like things to be completely tried and tested and completely sort of I'll be able to sleep at night, if you like. So for me, certain strategies have too many question marks in terms of their viability for the long term, particularly with serviced accommodation, with complications over mortgage arrangements and insurances, etc. It's still quite an unknown entity. So whilst it might seem like the next best thing since sliced bread to go into one of these newer strategies, and that for me includes rent to rent because it hasn't been around in the public domain for very long. Again, there's so many facets to tenant and landlord law and to the insurance elements and etc. You have to really know what you're doing, and I would suggest that if you're in a full-time role, that you need to concentrate on that, bringing in your income whilst you build this property portfolio up. So certain strategies can be very time intensive to set up, and bearing in mind that if you're doing something like rent to rent, or you're going out there trying to find deals which work out as lease options, you'll be spending a lot of time potentially putting those types of deals together and also managing them as well. So it's something to really bear in mind. So if you're doing well at development, then it could be an idea for you to do another development and use the capital that you have to drip feed yourself in terms of cash flow. Perhaps put a property into the melting pot that you buy and hold, and then perhaps a nice progression would be onto a smaller, less heavily regulated HMO, so that you can get to understand what you need to put in place for an HMO, but without the heavy mandatory licensable regulations. If you need any more help on that, then please get in touch when you're at that stage. And of course, there are other more advanced strategies where you can increase the amount of cash flow. So I was working with one buy-to-let landlord who'd been doing regular buy-to-lets and wanted to up the cash flow, and went on to doing a freehold to leasehold strategy, which is where you take a freehold building and you sort of split it into several units. Now, the properties he was looking at had already been split, they just hadn't been split in legal terms, in terms of the title. So he took for example, a 3-unit building, bought it as one freehold, and then split the entity into 3 separate leaseholds, therefore forcing the appreciation in terms of value, but also getting more cash flow out of it. So there are a lot of different things out there, as you know, as you've been on the courses, and like I say, hopefully that's given you a little bit more insight as to how I would be thinking about it if I were you. By all means, do more research, go out there, find out more things that you need to know and understand for your particular situation. But if you're running this alongside a full-time career, a full-time job, then you need to be very aware of the time implications that certain strategies can take. Now, if you've got any questions, any more questions around this topic, either you, Tony, or anybody else who's watching this, then feel free to tap them below in the comments box below this video, or leave me some feedback. Would be absolutely fantastic. And in the meantime, I look forward to reading more of your questions and to sharing more answers with you over the course of the next few weeks. Bye for now.